All right, well, how's it going, everybody? We just did a video on the New City Catechism question number 4, which was how and why has God created us? And in that video, we talked about how God has created us to glorify himself, to bring him glory. But as I talk about this, I realize this is kind of just a churchy word, right? We kind of throw this around, not really knowing what we're talking about, and in some way that's okay, but what does it mean to glorify God? And I want to hone in on that word, glorify, and even the word glory here for a second. In the second video on New City Catechism question 4, we talked about glorifying God. But I didn't share any Bible in that video. And so actually I wanted to dive into an Old Testament passage here as we explore what do we mean when we're talking about glory, and what do we mean when we're talking about glorifying God? We're going to dive into that right now. We're going to look at Ezekiel chapter 1, verses 22 through 28 after I get a drink of water. So starting with verse 22. And this is Ezekiel, who's a prophet of the Old Testament, sent by God to bring the message to the people. He's caught up into the presence of God, and then he tries to describe what he's seeing. He says, now over the heads of the living beings, there was something like an expanse, like the awesome gleam of crystal spread over their heads. Now above the expanse that was over their heads, there was something resembling a throne, like lapis lazuli. Just Google it, okay? It's a thing. In appearance. And on that which resembled a throne, high up, was a figure with the appearance of a man. There was a radiance around him, the appearance of a rainbow in the cloud on a rainy day. So was the appearance of the surrounding radiance. Such was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. And when I saw it, I fell on my face, and I heard a voice speaking. Those are amazing words, and I love that this is Ezekiel, the prophet of God, the man sent to speak for God and give the message to the people, and he is faltering with his words here. He's using words like appearance and likeness and the appearance of, the likeness of. This is what A.W. Tozer says on this passage in Ezekiel. He says, strange as this language is, that's an understatement there from Tozer, it still does not create the impression of unreality. One gathers that the whole scene is very real, but entirely alien to anything men know on earth. And so it's not unreal, but we recognize, and Ezekiel recognizes, and I think God allows him to kind of falter with how we describe the glory of God that he's seeing. So what does that have to do with us when we talk about glorifying God? Well, one thing is this. The glory of God is something you experience more than you describe. Not that you can't talk about it. But when you've experienced the glory of God, then you live your life to reflect that glory. And what we see is that the way we reflect God's glory is by living in obedience to him. I know, obedience is like a bad word. But when we live the way God has called us to, when we use the giftings that God has given us, when we follow the direction that God is leading us in, then our lives in some way reflect the glory of God. Like the glory that Ezekiel is trying to describe here, God is saying, I want you to reflect that in the way you live your life. And so, again, when we talk about glorifying God, it can seem like religious jargon. It can seem like just a churchy expression. But what we're talking about is that radiance that's like a rainbow in a cloud on a sunny day. That's just the radiance around the radiance of the glory of God, right? we get to in some way reflect that to the people around us through love, through joy, through God's compassion and his empathy and his compassion. And when we do that, God is saying, you're like me. You look like me, you have your Father's eyes in that moment. And so live life in such a way that you glorify God by reflecting his glory back to him and to the people around you. And like Eric Liddell, God has made me for a purpose, but he's also made me fast, so I'm going to run. So if God has made you fast, run, but run for the glory of God. If God has made you a doctor, then be a doctor and do that for the glory of God. And if God has made you a excellent cupcake maker, then make cupcakes excellently for the glory of God. And when you do, the glory of God will be reflected in your life, and that will give you rest. That will give you peace and joy. So I just love that, and I just wanted to share that with you. A little off the cuff. I don't know if it makes any sense, but I hope that's encouraging for you. I love hanging out with you guys here and making goofy videos and talking about all this stuff. And so I appreciate you guys coming and hanging in there. And any questions, please leave comments, share with friends, do all that stuff. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. I love the idea of building community here on this channel and with a podcast that talks about things that are relevant to young people exploring the Christian faith. So that's what I'm here for. I'm glad you guys found this channel, and I'm glad you guys hung in there and watched this video as I just kind of like spitball a few things. So look forward to being with you in the next one, as always.